to us about the challenges here. You said to me actually yesterday that you were expecting Russia to utilise ballistic weapons to target Ukraine. Ukraine's struggling to intercept them, and it doesn't really seem, how many years into this war that we're at, that Russia's running short of these missiles either.
No, it was running short of ballistic missiles, its own ballistic missiles, but it's been getting them now from North Korea. And the ones that we know of are the KN-23, or it's also called the Hwasong 11A, for those who worry about these things. It's been around a long time, and it's a missile that the North Koreans were supplying to the Russians. The Russians didn't like them to start with because they were very inaccurate and not very reliable. But the Russians have put their own guidance systems into them, made them good enough. And we know that the intelligence agencies around the world said that there was quite a big shipment last month of these KN-23s into Russia, and it looks as if these are probably what they are. That's one of them. They're good enough, and we don't know if that's what was used last night, but I wouldn't be surprised if it was. And the figures that the Ukrainians are quoting are, they said that there were 115 drones launched, of which they intercepted about 90% of them, but 23 ballistic missiles, all of which hit the ground, all of which got through, because the Ukrainians are out of interceptors. That's it. They needed Patriots. They've got Patriot batteries. They're out of ammunition. They've got no missiles to fire at them. And they've got some others, some other versions, but nothing really can stop a ballistic missile except a Patriot at the moment. That will change maybe next year when the Ukrainians develop they'll get their FP7, the 5.7, which looks as if it would be as good as a Patriot if they can get the rest of the system working with European help. But that's next year. And the Russians know that at the moment, any ballistic missiles they fire at Ukraine is almost certain to get through.
The detail of this was that Ukraine said that Russia had targeted civilian businesses in the strikes and that warehouses and other facilities were struck. Russia said, for its part, that they were logistic hubs and supply centres.
Yeah.
Now, a couple of days ago, Ukraine will have struck what it said were civilian businesses, what it would have said were logistics hubs and supply centres in Russia. And Russia will have gone, well, no, they're civilian businesses in the forms of our version of Amazon.
That's right.
The two of them are playing a similar dance at the moment. It feels like a kind of new phase of all of this.
And they're both true. They're both true. I mean, Wildberries, the Ukrainians have hit 13 of the 15 biggest Wildberries warehouses in Russia. They've actually hit about 60% of Wildberries storage space and caused, according to external estimates, about $3 billion worth of damage, which is a serious issue for Wildberries and for the Russian banking system, because Wildberries is the most indebted company in the whole of Russia. And if Wildberries goes down because of this damage, then it may take one of the banks down with it and cause a banking crisis. That's what the Ukrainians are hoping for. It is the case that Wildberries were supplying military equipment. They advertised it on their website. They took it down about 10 days ago. But they were advertising how much they did for their military. And the Ukrainians said, well, it's in your own words. It is the case that most civilian technologies have a military application, and all these big retailers end up supplying stuff that ends up somewhere in the defence system. So it is true that Wildberries is a defence supplier, like a lot of other things. And it is true that the Ukrainians also have warehouses of their online distribution, which the Russians are now hitting. And when the Russians say it's a logistics hub for the military, they may not be entirely wrong. It's not quite the same as Wildberries in Ukraine. It doesn't work in quite the same way. And Ukraine has spread its component base much, much wider than the Russians have. But nevertheless, the Russians can make that point, that in hitting retail outlets in Ukraine, they can make the same argument that the Ukrainians are making about Russia.